In mission together we all join our hands. In mission together throughout many lands. With our hearts united, our voices we raise. To God our Creator in glorious praise.
Greetings, neighbors. This is Reflections, the show sponsored by the Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where we do God's work with human hands. My name's Gregory Waldrop, and I'm the pastor at Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church, and I'm the co-host with this program with Karen Winkel, who is the pastor at the United Church of Paducah. And today, for our program, we thought we'd let you get acquainted with us. We spotlight a lot of other pastors, a lot of other churches around, and really we haven't taken time, except indirectly as we've talked with others, about who we are. And so today, Karen and I are going to share with you about our lives and our call and our churches as well. Welcome, Karen. Glad
Well, thank you, Gregory. This is kind of fun to be on the other side. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been just a joy to work with you, and now
Great
a little
joy.
adventure today to share.
Good deal. Well, start by telling us about your life in ministry and what got you to made clear your call. And
Well, looking back, I kind of see that call was really always there, but I didn't know how to make meaning of it, and that's true for many people. But I think even as a child, I had a theological bent and kind of had a desire to think deeply about God and what it meant to be a child of God, and so I found church kind of a frustrating place to be. I loved it, but also it had kind of this other side. So as I grew up, I kind of struggled with the church because I felt, as a child, I felt patronized sometimes, and then I had questions that nobody seemed to have the answer to, and but I just kept hanging in there with the church, and
you grew up in the United Church?
I grew up in the United Church of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and which is a denomination that's 1 year older than I am. So that was kind of interesting. That the roots go back to the origins of this country, and then of course back to the old countries of England and Germany. But being part of a younger denomination was exciting for me because there was a lot kind of happening.
Taking shape.
Right, yeah. And so anyway, the church that shaped me the most is a church in California that it also was about as old as I was. So it was a new church start. And so there was a lot of vitality and a lot of experimentation, and that very much affected the way that I think about what church life can be. I didn't really let that sense of call come forward until after I'd finished my first career in higher education. I used to work with international students, and my job was eliminated. And I think one of the things I say is sometimes God is sneaky. So I think God had been getting me ready during that career, but I so loved that work that it would never have occurred to me to leave. There would have been no motivation to leave. I worked with fabulous students and with a fabulous staff, and so God kind of took care of that. There was no bargaining to be done.
Right.
And when that job came to an end, I was in a position of having no debt and no ties to anything, and I thought, well, I'm going to give back. I've been, well compensated, and I've had, a lovely career. I'll spend a little time just giving back. And so I went and worked with a Navajo congregation in northern Arizona for $125 a month. They provided housing and more adventures than I knew what to do with. And it was while I was there that I saw that what I had been doing at the university and what was needed in a church really were not all that far apart. And so I ended up going to school, back to school, and
Where were you in seminary?
I went to seminary in Berkeley, California, Pacific School of Religion, which is a seminary that is affiliated with my denomination, and every year I lived on campus, which I hadn't done when I was a student before, and every year I looked out over the San Francisco Bay, and it was just a gorgeous place and a stimulating environment. My school was part of a collection of seminaries, a consortium, and so any given class would have a variety of Roman Catholics, Franciscans, Dominicans, Jesuits. We had an Episcopal school, Presbyterians. It was just this wonderful ecumenical mix. And so I really think that was more the education, was just being with all these other folks and really feeling from them, not just getting their ideas, but I could feel the culture of the church that each person had been raised in, and that was important to me. I'm very ecumenical, and so that was a rich time. When I graduated, I served a church first in Utah, and then had worked off and on with the church in Colorado. So while I was there doing some short-time ministry, then I got a phone call out of the blue that said, would you be interested in a church in Paducah, Kentucky? And no, I'm going to stay in the West.
Wow,
and
West,
as I got to know the church here in Paducah, I thought, oh, this is just too irresistible. I've got to go. So I say the winds of the Spirit blew me to the other side of the Mississippi, into this this part of the world. So, yeah.
Great. Well, my own journey is different than that. In some ways it wasn't. I had a fairly standard growing up in the church. That church on the corner, big church on the corner in Mayfield, Kentucky, and went through, did all the sort of regular activities, and had great care in the church, and just considered it a part of my life experiences. I was a junior in high school, beginning to think about what life was going to be beyond high school, beyond Mayfield, and in the middle of a mission trip, actually a youth and missions conference over at Lake Junaluska in North Carolina, I was accepted so completely and so unconditionally by this group of 200 youth my own age that all of a sudden everything that they'd been saying in Sunday school and church became clear, experientially. It was this. I didn't know a single other person in this camp. My church had sent me there. I was really supposed to go on a family vacation and wasn't really supposed to be there. But the family vacation got canceled at the last minute. We were going with friends who worked with AT&T, and there'd been a big strike in the northeast of AT&T, and they couldn't go, and so we canceled. And so I ended up at this Youth and Missions Conference, and there, right before my senior year in high school, this enormous experience that brought into sharp focus, this enormous grace of God and its claim on my life and what it had meant, all the things it had provided already in my life. At any rate, it got that experience got tangled up in what I was going to be. You can imagine a senior in high school. It's sort of one of those fertile times when you're thinking about certainly where to go to college, what to be, what to do. And by 6 months, it became clear to me that God was calling me to preach and into the ministry. And that was a part of a youth revival all across Mayfield, really across this region in western Kentucky. There was a big renewal around the youth, and at any rate, it was a great moment, a great time. It was fully embraced by my church. I don't know, my family sort of wondered about it sometimes, but they were supportive, and I made sort of the regular trek. I studied religion at Lambeth, now university, down at the Methodist College here in this region. Had a great time, and in the course of study there was encouraged to apply and received a fellowship when I went to Scotland and did 2 years seminary in Scotland, which was a part of that very rich, large horizons got immediately expanded theologically. It was somewhat like your seminary experience in that there were certainly many Presbyterian folks, but also Methodists were there, and Anglicans and Catholics. In fact, we took a group of us, went to down to Durham, England one time. I went to St. Andrews, Scotland to study. And we went down to Durham, England to what they wanted to call a tri conversation, a trialogue, not a dialogue. We were going to get the Roman Catholic seminary there and the Anglican seminary and then this Presbyterian seminary. Well, among our little group from St. Andrews, there was a Methodist and a Baptist and a Scots Presbyterian, Scottish Church of Scotland person. So we had a trialogue just among our little group. So it was a very rich time and a wonderful time. I came back to Duke, finished up my time there, my seminary time there.
Mm-hmm. How does that experience inform the ministry that you do in Paducah, Kentucky?
Well, for me, there were three things happened there that I think were, and by the way, the tie I'm wearing is a clergy tartan tie from those days. But I do think it expanded my world to look out and see this enormous array of religious expression and religious experience. I can remember an encounter with a Chinese Christian and an amazingly different experience of life and faith and spirit that this person brought to this setting. And anyway, it really expanded my notion of what was religious and what wasn't religious, and how culturally determined that so oftentimes gets. So that certainly has been a part of what I am. The other thing that I don't think there's any question, but became aware of how important good, clear-headed thinking is. Not so much about the faith, but to have the faith so integrally a part of your life that it is your faith thinking. You don't say, what would Jesus do so much as you find your life in Christ and then act out of that. And to think, again, as one of the great Scottish theologians said, it's not so much to think about the faith, but that for the faith to actually be thinking in you. And
so that it's integrated.
It's integrated.
As opposed to something that's just kind of
That's right.
applied to the surface
That's
of your
right.
life. It's something that's
Incarnated.
Uh-huh.
It's not foreign, and it is incarnated. That is a part of the gift of life in Christ. Mm-hmm. There is something very organic about this faith. And for it to be organic, and I think that's the third thing, it has to be a part of routine and habit and pattern. I began to realize, the sort of the dour Scots sometimes are made fun of because they're got this notion of discipline and regimen and routine, but I began to see the life and vitality in that. Not that life was controlled or dictated by routine, but that a solid, stable routine was the way, a wonderful way to form life. Number one, for life to be formed within you and in Christ. But secondly, to then be able to interact and react in solid and strong ways.
I think I had a little taste of that, that discipline, that structure. I spent some time last fall with Benedictine monks in northern New Mexico. And, I'm from the generation that wants to break rules and says that these things are confining and let's improvise, let's explore, and it's taken me a long time to see the great gift in that structure and that discipline, that actually is this wonderful container then. Otherwise things just spill all over the place and have no aren't held
Yeah.
in something, and you don't have a way to keep coming back and examine really what's going on, because it's all just free form all the time.
Right. One of the places that really, I was there in the late 60s, late 70s, 75 to 77, when I was in Scotland. And I had a buddy there who, without coordination, I found this friend from Dresden, Tennessee, who was in the same university I was, in the same residence hall I was, in the same courses in the seminary, again, without coordination. So anyway, we were buddied up, and part of what we did was, on every break, we went behind the Iron Curtain. That was the place he was particularly intrigued by, and I sort of followed with him, and we had some amazing adventures in a very heavily persecuted church in East Germany, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, and in Hungary. I had tried to go to Russia at that time, the Soviet Union, but it was such a difficult ordeal to get a visa. All those places had to be visas. You had to have visas, but they were much less elaborate planning than Russia had to. But it was in an experience with those persecuted churches that, again, many portions of the Bible came alive in very, very amazing ways. I began to see and was challenged at the depth of my faith when I saw the depth of their faith and what they were living by and going through. I still keep up with them in a lot of ways, a lot of folks there, and have and celebrate November the 9th, 1989 as a very holy day. That day, you may remember the pictures of the Berlin Wall being pushed over. A lot of experiences by that. I didn't actually see them, but I am quite confident that the people that instructed me in faith and life, whose communities were solid across those persecuted countries, were on that wall somewhere, because it was their faith and their hope that brought down that oppression without a single bullet being fired. I can remember, I can remember leaving one of the houses of worship there after one Sunday in Dresden, East Germany, and all they talked about was liberation and hope and freedom. And I walked out saying, and this was in 1977, and I walked out of there saying, man, get real. You are under the thumb of the strongest military nation the world has ever known. And all you're talking about is God really getting ready to set you free. And I said, you really need to get more realistic. And because that was what they were praying, that was what they were believing, that was what they were hoping. And on November the 9th, 1989, with enormous tears, I realized whose faith was really, who needed to get realistic about faith. It was me and not them. So anyway, it's been a rich time. That was a very rich time for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because that's like entirely new to me. You and I have talked many times about many things, and there's this whole big chunk of your life that I didn't know about. Yeah. Talk about your ministry at Fountain Avenue and what's exciting you there.
Well, what is most exciting to me is the things that were all in place and active and going when I got there. Almost everything that I'm most energized by right now were things that, if they hadn't been going, I'd have encouraged them to start, but they were already there and already happening. Things like taking seriously their neighborhood context. And for many years, long before I got there, Fountain Avenue's been reaching out to that neighborhood and where so many of them live and have lived, in many of the members, and the neighborhood's changing. There's a little different dynamic going there, and now with the neighborhood, the city's neighborhood revitalization, it's even more exhilarating place to be. But they've been doing that in great ways, extending open, free breakfast 7 or 8 times a year just to get people in the building, get connected, become a hub, an anchor, a corner on which people can depend. I'm thrilled with that. There's sort of out of the church has grown a ministry of housing. The neighborhood is filled with housing possibilities, and we're trying to take part, a good part, a healthy part, and make provision certainly for people that are in the neighborhood and want to stay in the neighborhood as it revitalizes, but whose resources are limited, but also new neighbors that want to come in and make a fresh start there. And so that's been a great joy, a great delight. It's a community. Fountain Avenue has a delightful worship community and sensibility. It knows how to celebrate big at big occasions. We did a 100th year anniversary last year. The building itself was 100 years old, and we celebrated that century of being in place there on Fountain Avenue and Monroe Street. And it knows how to do big things really well. It also knows how to do quiet things. And it knows how to lament when sadness impacts us. It knows how to, it knows all the subtleties of life in its worship life. It's got a great music program, and it has for a long time, and a beautiful setting. So it is a church that is attentive. That when you say something, they listen to it, and they interact and respond, and that's a great gift and a great joy, and a good, something I thrill to. A place of thoughtful Christianity, and a place that includes, the mind, the emotions, the spirit, all together. It's been great, really great.
Well, it's been a privilege for me to, in your pastorate there and in Dan Leslie before you, I kind of feel like I'm a cousin over there, or maybe probably more than that, but folks have really embraced me and are always very supportive, and so I kind of think of myself as a associate member of your church.
I'm glad for it. Tell us about United Church.
Well, one of the things that our church reckons with is the decision of the denomination when it formed in 1957 to come up with a name that makes us then easily confused with another denomination. We're the United Church of Christ, and in this part of the country we get confused quite a bit with the Church of Christ, and that is a little bit difficult for us because in the way that we worship and in the way that we think theologically, we're a little bit different, and so we're all the time trying to kind of swim upstream against that current of a misunderstanding about who we are. We're a small congregation that I think really is a place of hospitality that is needed everywhere, but a place of hospitality for people who think a little bit differently theologically, people who, for whom kind of the typical doctrinal statements of the Christian church don't quite work. And so we're a good church for people who ask questions or have doubts, are really seeking for something authentic that they haven't found yet in another church, and that for me is very important because I think I kind of qualify as one of those people. As I said earlier, I've kind of my whole life kind of struggled a little bit to find really deep, authentic meaning in the church. So we excel at providing a place of hospitality for those folks, as well as folks who, for one reason or another, feel maybe socially marginalized. The tagline for my church is that we are the church that love built. And I've never seen a congregation more genuinely loving and so radically hospitable as United Church of Paducah. Yeah, and you just can't teach people to do this. People have to teach one another how to do that. So that for me just always warms my heart and challenges me. I mean, I learned from them how to be that radically inclusive. We've just finished hosting some folks that came from southern Indiana to help us clean up our yard following the ice storm, and so I'm still kind of riding the high from that. But my church is full of people who are kind of can-do, we'll take care of ourselves kind of church, and so it was very humbling for us. We're on a pretty good-sized lot, and with lots of trees. I never did count them, but it seems after the storm it seemed like 500, but that's not true. And that was just overwhelming for us to even begin to think about how we were going to clean up that property. Many of our folks are aging or not in really good health, and so to need another church was kind of humbling for us, but there ended up being a gift. I think our faith teaches us that there is a kind of strength in being weak, and I think we learned about that a little bit, that our lives were made so much richer by the gifts of these folks who came from Indiana to help us. A church our size, and in some ways kind of has struggled in some of the same ways we have. So I think that was good for us to open ourselves to being helped.
Great. Well, it is a joy to get a little more of our lives out here in front of those folks that we share with and with each other. It's a good gift.
Yeah.
You are a good gift to this community, and especially to this show and to my life as we connect together.
So are you. You're one of the first people that I met when I came to Paducah, and I thought, whoever this Gregory Waldrop guy, he's great. So that opinion has never changed yet.
We are a good team.
I think so.
And so there you have it. Why don't you send us
out? Well, Paducah Cooperative Ministry is what brought us together, and it's what brings us together through this program. And we would just invite you with Paducah Cooperative Ministry to do that good work of doing God's work with our human hands. So thank you for joining us, and shalom.
Shalom.
In